Peru goes through this period. They recognize they want to spend more money and more investment on public schooling and improving it. They go through the things we talked about, updating the curriculum, investing in teachers, reporting, helping teachers pay and whatnot. What are the outcomes of that? What happens to what are the effects on the educational economy? And how does it differ between private school, public schooling, and in the general environment?
Okay, so what happens in Peru is that the learning outcomes in public schools start to improve quite steadily from about 2010 onwards, and they improve quite dramatically in a sense that if you look at the early 2010s, there's quite a big gap in urban areas between the private schools and public schools. So the private schools, on average, do a lot better when we look at the national tests that they carry out there. So basically, what Peru does is that it actually has very good system of testing children. So they test children in grade 2 in all school types. So you have a very good sort of comparative data set for that. They do also some testing at higher grades, but it's a bit more scattered. You don't have such a clear sort of time series for every single year. But
Okay.
for grade 2, which is the data that we mostly use, you see that there's this quite rapid improvement in public sector, to the extent that by 2016, the public sector catches up with the private sector in reading, and in mathematics, it actually exceeds the private sector. So, quite rapid improvement in the learning outcomes, at least in grade 2. Now, you might say that, okay, that's grade 2, and can we really trust these numbers? They're coming from the Peruvian system. Is there somebody, cooking up the numbers or something?
Okay.
But if you look at PISA, which is the international OECD test, which is carried out on older students who are 15 years old, you also see quite good improvement there. So, talking of PISA, they basically had quite poor results in 2009. And in 2012, which was the next PISA, that's when they had a dramatic moment in Peru. Basically, Peru scored the last out of 65 countries. So the
And
results came out
that's what stimulated this
partly.
effort here.
Yes. So I mean, in 2000, so this was basically PISA carried out at the end of 2012, and in 2013, at the end of 2013, there was a new education minister who had just been in his office for about a month, and they get the results that you are now the worst out of 65 countries tested globally. And of course, the newspapers are blasting that we are the worst. And the picture of the education minister there, what are we going to do now? And I mean, of course, the good thing with this is that this was the time when education got all the attention. Education rarely makes it to the front pages of newspapers in any country. But, being at the very bottom of PISA was a sort of a PISA shock for Peru.
Hmm.
And undoubtedly that contributed to the public awareness of the poor state of the education in Peru, and probably helped to rally the political momentum behind education, which is always very important. If you want to get anything done in the government, there needs to be political sort of consensus behind it and the resources. So yes, we saw the improvement also in PISA, not just Peru's own tests, and very significant. But we should also say that I should emphasize that not all of the improvement is necessarily down to these reforms. So now it's very easy to say that, okay, there were these reforms and the results went up, so it must be the reforms. But if you look at this thing a bit more carefully, you also see that some of the learning improvements already started a few years before the reforms really kicked in.
Okay.
So, and basically, there may be some explanations to that. For instance, we know that the cohort sizes were reducing, so the numbers of pupils were reducing in most of the schools. But since the teachers had a contract for life, they didn't really kick out any teachers nor reduce the school numbers. So in practice, what you saw is improving pupil-teacher ratios across the country. So the same teachers, less pupils, so that means more attention per pupil from the existing teachers. Also, at the same time, you had a growing economy, which meant reducing poverty. So as you have quickly reducing poverty, we'll have parents with more resources, potentially better nutrition for children, more educational investments within home,
Hmm.
and also urbanization. And as you urbanize, you of course move to an environment from rural areas where you just have the agriculture and mining to urban areas where you start to think that, what sort of job would I do? Perhaps I should educate myself. So it's possibly also an increased demand in education.
Sure.
So what I'm just emphasizing is that there were lots of reforms, lots of important reforms, and some of those reforms have been evaluated by other researchers, not me, but other Peruvian researchers, and they have shown that those particular components of those reforms did improve learning outcomes. But not all of it is due to these reforms. There were also underlying factors, economic growth, reduction of poverty,
Yeah.
and such things.
Yeah, and that makes sense ultimately. If children have more resources, they're not going to school hungry, they can focus more, their attention's better. Sounds as though that ratios between students and teachers are improving anyway, and that's obviously always going to have better educational outcomes if teachers can spend more quality time with each individual child, as well as just having more economic resources at home, being able to bus maybe to the right schools and all that kind of stuff as well. So these reforms seem to have contributed a very significant amount to these educational improvements, but just not the whole amount by the sounds of it.
Absolutely.